The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap. On today's episode, the Trident Room Podcast host, Michael Gannon, sits down with Aviator of the Year, Captain Valerie Smith.
What would you pass on to somebody who's at flight school right now, finding out what their airframe is going to be, and thinking about their first fleet tour that's coming up? What would you pass to them as a new aviator, as an officer, regardless of gender? And then what would you pass along to your female peers?
I think the main thing I would tell my past self would be what we talked about earlier, not taking everything so personally and keep giving your max effort, because sometimes it feels like you're just digging a deeper hole when in reality you just can't see the bigger picture and what's being built, and the small part you're playing in it really does make a difference. I'm not sure really in what other way besides mentally. Probably I would wish I had known before getting into the military just how much gender would be brought up and a factor in others' thoughts. Although I'm really thankful to not really have been exposed to that as a kid when I was young. I do think there are situations where people in the military were exposed to those kind of thoughts and setting a different standard for the expectations of genders, and that can create some self-doubt as they grow up. And everyone experiences different things in their minds that can be supported by outsiders' comments. So it is unfortunate the level of gossip that goes around. I would say sometimes there is a fascination with females' personal lives for whatever reason. It is a little bit skewed. It is sometimes tough to keep a personal life private. As a young mid, I think that really the fear of having that affect my career was constantly on my mind. I didn't want to be a person talked about, or even, but as I got older, it's you can't control rumors, whether it's true or not, and it just takes one comment or one thought, and that's on someone's mind, whether it's actually happening or not. So, again, I think go back to that first bullet point, just working your hardest. I think that will shine through regardless of whatever drama may follow. But young mid, young female, young pilot, just, I would say, mental preparation, and don't let the small stuff get you tied up.
So, we've talked about gender, we've talked about aviation, we've talked about glass ceilings, we've talked about some of the universality of some of the problems of being left out simply because you're different from, your geographic location, from your gender to your marital status, because you just don't fall into the majority group, so to speak. And thinking about where naval aviation was nearly 30 years ago, 2 decades ago, at least in the 1990s. I won't recount any of that, but I'm certain you're aware of it. How do you think we're faring compared to a generation ago? Have we gotten better, and how much farther do you think we have to go?
So, going back to my original CO that we talked about with my lack of MEU experience, he was also the first CO I had when we were giving out call signs. He let me know. I was a schedule writer, so I feel like in the squadron I had an abnormally high visibility time with him, because almost daily I was in his office getting the schedule routed. So I don't know if some people listening think, wow, this first lieutenant's really comfortable going up to talk to her CO, but that wasn't necessarily the case. Sometimes he was open door when we're routing the schedule and just wants to pick my brain, or vice versa, lets me ask him a question. So one of the days we conversed about how call signs are given, and he did give me some stories in the past. Like you're saying, he was probably 15 years my senior, but just stories about, terrible call signs that women would get for different things. But to be fair, I'm sure just as many guys were getting, maybe not the most professional of call signs, but it's an acronym. And I am not against call signs. I definitely see the intent behind them. I see the purpose. You don't want to be saying people's names over the radio. It definitely is beneficial to have a way to communicate so everyone knows who you're talking about without bead windowing yourself or giving away information to the enemy. But at the same time, I was, a little worried about what the outcome might be. And I was fortunate enough, our squadron did tasteful call signs for everyone. He assured me in that conversation that he would not let what he's seen happen to females in the past happen to us in the future. So I do think it's making its way up to the leadership. I think they're implementing things to even the playing field out, and I appreciate that. In general, I think we've come a long way also in understanding, physical limitations of the human body and what effects that has on operations, like developing a crew day or I'm safe, which I'm not sure if people are familiar with that who aren't aviators, but it's essentially a way to, before a flight, you can say, I'm safe, in regards to if you've had, taken any medication, if you didn't sleep very well the night before, if you haven't eaten, you have any emotional issues, or if you've had alcohol within the window you're not supposed to, things like that. And, kind of no harm, no foul. We would rather you self-admit that you're not prepared to fly than go ball it up flying, or that idea that it's a no-fail mission, because there are times where there are no-fail missions where you need to execute, but they are definitely not occurring in the training environment. So I think things like that are good. Also, cockpits now, so 53s or some of them still have spots for ashtrays, or at least all of them in the airframe. It's built in the inside of the cockpit, but they're not being installed anymore. I haven't seen them in current aircraft. So I just think overall for physical performance, we're definitely progressing, and we've learned from, the writing on the wall with past mishaps. So I think that's also trending on the up and up. And we've advanced leaps and bounds, I think, thanks to technology and the assets that we have at our fingertips in the 21st century. Just that baseline of people entering the Fleet Marine Force is significantly greater than, the old charts and compasses of the past. So, I would say overall we're definitely trending up, and it's exciting to see what the future holds, although it did look like by 2030 we're shooting for 60%, 40% from unmanned man percentage. So I'm not sure I'll have a job here in the future, but we'll see.
Yeah, but you're pretty good at what you do. So in wrapping this up and closing things up, do you have anything that you'd like to shout out to the audience, so to speak? Personal, professional, funny story, anecdote. The mic is yours, and you can talk about whatever you want. Anything you want to just pass on to the audience?
Funny story. The most recent thing I can think of I was embarrassed about professionally. I recently attended the OAG, which is where the Marine Corps Aviation Association Award ceremony was held this past July in Dallas, Texas. And I was meeting and being introduced to so many people the entire week just based off the award I had won, and meeting my sponsors, which the Aviator of the Year award sponsored by Rolls-Royce. By the time the award ceremony came around at the end of the week, I was, ready to head home and recuperate. After getting off stage, there were a group about 5 people or so that came up and ambushed me right off the stage, still had my trophy in my hands, and everyone was introducing themselves from Sikorsky. And I was happy they introduced themselves to me, even if it was at the very, last minute, but I was happy they were present, and I'm not sure they might not have been tracking that a person who was operating Sikorsky products had won that award, just because they aren't the sponsors of that particular Aviator of the Year award. But the first person that approached me in the group was a woman. She introduced herself as, "Hi, I'm Natalie." And as the introductions continued around the circle, I was introduced to several other important people within the headquarters of Sikorsky, to include their president. And so I turned back to the first woman because, she was the first one to approach me in front of the group, very, dominant. And so I asked her, to start conversation. So, are you accompanying, the man standing next to you? And she chuckled and said no. So later she gave me her card, and I looked her up, and it turns out she was the vice president of strategy and business development for Sikorsky. So I just done to her what I hated people doing to me. When I checked into I-Day at the Naval Academy, a woman asked my family in the elevator as we're going down to leave for Annapolis, "Hey, are you there to drop off your son?" And they point to my brother, and my family, start laughing, and I'm getting angry. And my parents are like, "No, we're dropping off our daughter," pointing at me on the other side, or, all the times. And I'm sure other people can also vouch for this, but I cannot count how many times my bill at a restaurant gets added to whatever guy is sitting closest to me, even if I'm out with just a group of friends. And it used to bother me a lot, but ultimately, as I got older, it's like, well, if the guys don't notice, they're going to give me a free meal. That's fine by me. But yeah, I was just, embarrassed on what is to date my most important night for my military career. I associated Natalie being at the event being hitched to a male. So I challenge everyone to include myself, to accept everyone at face value for what they, individually have to offer, regardless of predispositions we might find ourselves falling victim to in our minds.
No, Valerie, that is that's an awesome story, and it happens to all of us, from misreading context clues and interpretation of the event and everything else. I wish my bill got passed off to the nearest guy or gal. I don't care. I just wish somebody else was paying it, but I'm that cheap. So that, but I'm just cheap. So it is what it is. But, take it for an advantage and enjoy the free meal that comes across every so often.
Exactly.
It's a win. And somebody said there's no such thing as a free lunch, but you just gave a pretty good example.
Sometimes there are.
Well, Valerie, that was an awesome interview. I'm really glad you were able to take the time and stay up late tonight and talk to us and discuss your experiences as an aviator, as the Aviator of the Year, and everything going forward. I wish you well, and I hope you continue to break glass ceilings, so to speak. Maybe you'll be the first female. What's the next aviator glass ceiling for females that you can break? Hopefully there are no more glass ceilings. Really appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with me tonight, and staying up late and going through all this and sharing your experiences, your stories, your wisdom, and everything else. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Yeah. Awesome. well, have a good night, and hopefully we'll hear from you again the next time you do something awesome.
I hope that happens in the future.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. For more information about today's guest and topics, please visit the show notes. The Trident Room Podcast has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School, Alumni Association, and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/Trident Room Podcast.